Full Conference Week. I see many names that have been with us most of the week, and I see some new names, so welcome. On behalf of our Board of Directors and team, we're so pleased to bring you this week of free webinars to increase your understanding and deepen your knowledge of Rett syndrome research and care practices. Your children are incredibly important to us, and having your attention and engagement today demonstrates your deep commitment as well, and we're really glad to have you with us. Before we begin, for those of you who are attending for your first webinar, I'd like to go over some brief technology points on how GoToWebinar operates. The audio feed is open only for presenters, so you don't have to worry about your background noise interfering with the presentation. But you do have the opportunity to submit questions. If you look at the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see a control panel window. And in the question box, you can type in any questions that you have for Jenny Downs throughout the presentation, and we'll field all of the questions at the end. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will work with her to get your questions answered through email afterwards. If the control panel window is distracting to you, you can click on the small orange box with a white arrow to minimize that window, and then you can click on it again to expand it if you wish to submit a question. The session today is being recorded. We will pause recording during the video of children, but during Jenny's content, we will be recording, so you don't have to trouble yourself with taking notes. And we'll send you a link to the recording via email within the next week or so after our webinar. If you're having any trouble hearing, please check and turn up the volume on your phone or device. If you have any trouble with your screen at any point during the webinar, you can just back out of the application and rejoin. And we are checking email and we're reading the question box, so let us know if you're having any technical troubles. So on that note, I would like to introduce Jenny Downs, who's a physiotherapist in the US, known as a physical therapist from Australia. So good morning, Jenny. It's Thursday morning for you. And Jenny has over 20 years of clinical pediatric experience and has worked in children's hospitals and centers in Perth, Sydney, and London. Since completing her PhD in 2003, she's worked in research on several rare disorders with a particular focus on Rett syndrome. And she's currently a chief investigator for a program of research with the Australian Rett syndrome study. She's investigated many areas of Rett syndrome and has a particular interest in functional abilities and spinal health. She delivered a wonderful webinar yesterday on scoliosis, and in particular, the translation of research findings into clinical practice, which we very much appreciate her for. She led the development of clinical management guidelines for scoliosis and Rett syndrome, and helped develop the booklet, which is available on rettsyndrome.org and is also available on the Australian website, which Jenny will talk about. Today, she's going to present information learned from the longitudinal Australian Rett syndrome database and in the International Inter-Rett database on gross motor skills and their use in daily life. The majority of our girls with Rett syndrome will learn to sit, and approximately half will learn to walk, usually before the age of 7 years. And for those who are unable to walk, supported standing likely has a role to play in improving bone health and is one way to provide variety of body position and activity. And Jenny's going to talk to us about this today. And then by the end of the session, you should be able to understand a variety of acquisition and maintenance of motor skills in Rett syndrome and the value of gross motor activity, whatever the level of walking. So at this time, I'd like Megan with rettsyndrome.org to go ahead and turn over the screen controls to Jenny, and we'll let her begin her presentation. I don't see your slide quite yet, Jenny. Just one more second.
There you are. I think I've done it.
There we go.
Can you see me? And is my screen, are my slides full screen or not yet?
Not yet. You slide sorter.
Yep. Okay. And you have it now?
Perfect.
Okay, we're there. Okay, thank you very much, Paige and Megan. As Paige said, I've now been working with the Rett syndrome group here in Australia, and it's been now 10 years that I've had the privilege of working with our Australian study and also our international study, and that is our international database called Interret, and many of you will have heard of Interret and possibly have also participated. So it's lovely to be talking to you all. This is the slide I did show yesterday for my previous presentation, but to introduce us and our location, this is where we're from. It's Perth in Western Australia, and we are one of the most isolated cities in the world. So but here we are working very passionately with a rare disorder. It doesn't matter where we're from, I don't think. But here is our building, the Telethon Kids Institute, and if you look at this picture of our river and this very large green section at Kings Park, our building is just over the other side of that park. And this is the picture that's shown on our Facebook page. And here is Helen Leonard, myself, and Amy and Nada do a lot of telephoning to families in the US with regards to passwords for our login for our current survey. So many of you will have spoken to Helen, myself, Amy, or Nada. So the basis for all the findings that we're able to pull together is our database structure. And this slide is showing the Australian database structure. Now 22 years old, recruiting families who have a daughter with Rett syndrome from across the country. So it's what I would describe as a very wide database. But here also you can see that there's longitudinal administration of questionnaires and longitudinal video data collection. So as well as being wide, the database becomes very long. And in particular today, I will be able to present you some information we have learned from our video studies and more detailed studies of motor abilities. And so therefore we can increase the depth of our understanding. So it's becoming a very three-dimensional shape. And so here is a similar diagram of our Interret database. Newer, but nevertheless now nearly 13 years old. And this database has been supported by rettsyndrome.org, or previously IRSF, and before that IRSA. So we have a long relationship with what is now known as rettsyndrome.org, and we're very proud of that. And so we have been setting up as wide a database as we can. This goes globally, but we have a very robust participation from families in the United States. And now we are working to build this, this very valuable resource into collecting information in a second wave of data collection. So this is our 2015 questionnaire, and for those of you who are participating, we are just so grateful for all of that, because we're hoping to build that depth of what we're learning from our Australian families, but building it over countries and over larger numbers. So we're very excited for the future of Interret. As Paige announced, our objectives for today are to look at the variety in the acquisition and maintenance of motor skills in Rett syndrome, and to explore how gross motor activities can be embedded in daily life. So our first question is, what do we know about motor skills? So the first aspect to consider is the learning of sitting and independent sitting, and the learning of independent walking. And these are sort of the fundamental milestones that parents watch for very, very carefully while their children are developing and growing older. And here we've put together information from Interret and also from Aussie Rett, and you can see the very large numbers that we're able to achieve with that. And so what that means, the next two slides I will show you a graph of the proportions of children who have learned these skills. But with this very large number, this improves our precision of how we understand these skills in relation to Rett syndrome. So that is of extraordinary value. So this slide is showing the acquisition of sitting. There's over 800 girls who are represented in this slide, and what it's showing you is time, age across the x-axis, and the likelihood of sitting, which converts to a percentage. So there's a 50% likelihood of sitting at this point in time, which is about 9 months of age. But essentially, by 2 years, what we see is that almost all, more than 90% of girls with Rett syndrome will have learned to sit independently, and that thereafter we see that there are still some girls, you can see these little notches, who gain that ability to sit independently. But that is usually before 7 years of age. So this is a representation of how the acquisition of sitting occurs across a very large number of girls who represent the variability that we see in Rett syndrome. So sitting is a strength for Rett syndrome. So this slide is showing you, again, we have a little bit more data on walking. So we've got over 900 girls in this, represented in this graph. And again, we can see age in years across the bottom of the graph, the x-axis, and again, the proportion who can walk up the y-axis. And here, as you would expect, sitting occurs earlier than walking. So we see this graph is shifted a little bit to the right. And essentially what we are seeing is that around 50% of girls with Rett syndrome will have learned to walk independently by 2 years. And beyond that time period, there are smaller proportions of girls who are learning the ability to walk. And similar to sitting, this is usually before the 7-year age. 7 years of age, 7, sometimes 8. So this is giving you a sense of the time period over which in this very large number of girls that this particular skill was acquired. And we also know, not for sitting, the capacity to sit is seen across the different common mutations. But for walking, we do see a difference. And if we look down the list, down all the list of numerical data for these 900 girls, we will see higher proportions of girls with mutations such as the 294X, 306C, 133C, and the C-terminal deletions who have learned the ability to walk. And we will see smaller proportions of the mutations, of girls with the mutations that are associated with a more severe phenotype who have not learned the ability to walk. But in each of the mutation categories, there are some children who can walk. So this is what we see in almost all of the aspects of Rett syndrome. So there is variability across the mutation groups. There are patterns, but there is also some variability within the mutation groups. So our next way of sort of going deeper into looking at gross motor function is to look at some of the findings from our video studies. And we initially conducted a video study in 1999. Sorry, not 99, I'm looking at the number 99, 2004. We conducted another wave in 2007, and we've recently done another wave in 2012. So we have 3 sets of data, and one of my next jobs in the next month or so is to put that data together as a whole and really sort of understand at a deeper level how the girls have been developing. But what I will be able to talk about today is findings from our first 2 videos. So the first one, we had 99 girls and women with video information on their gross motor function, and follow-up was we had 70 girls who had a video at both time points. We do have more in total, but at that point there were 70 who had also provided us with an initial video. And so after families have been recruited to this study, we send them a protocol, we list the activities that we wanted to observe, and then they return the video to us, and we can then code the girl's performance of each of these skills in terms of her need for assistance. And it's a real journey in technology. Our 2004 study, families provided us with VHS tapes. And so we have a cupboard full of VHS tapes. And then in 2008, we were collecting DVDs. And now in 2012, or more recently in 2012, we were collecting video clips on email, Dropbox. It's really a very different world. So this is us traveling with video, and it's been, I guess, it's just our times are changing, and so our research must also change with that. So from our original 99, from what we also observed, similar to the acquisition of sitting, we could see, just looking at these purple bars, that sitting is a strength. And sitting on the floor was possible independently for towards 80%. And also, not quite similar to that, was sitting on a stool for 10 seconds. So that's sitting on a surface but without back support. So that might not be a stool, it might be the edge of a chair, but certainly not using the back support of the chair. And this was children whose age was as young as 3 or 4, but also we include, there were women in this study who were towards 30. So we had sitting remained a strength for this group. Standing was, independent standing was possible for a little bit less than 40%, and you can see as this duration of standing goes up, that a smaller, slightly smaller proportion of girls were able to maintain their standing position. We observed that a much smaller proportion were able to complete transition skills on their own, and this highlights the fact that transition movements are particularly challenging for Rett syndrome, and our hypotheses are that this relates to dyspraxia, where the planning of a movement, the planning of an activity takes more time. And this is articulated in previous presentations that I've heard at conferences very well by speakers who are talking about communication skills. So here in the gross motor arena, we see this dyspraxia represented in really delaying how the girl can sort of get started with the planning of this more complex movement, and it often makes it very difficult to achieve. And here we are showing the proportions of girls who are able to walk, and we can see this is slightly more than 40% were walking independently for 10 steps. And it's interesting that this is slightly higher than the number that were able to stand. And this is because what we find is that standing is a still posture, but of course it's upright, it's in standing. And so a lot of girls, when they were upright, had to keep taking steps, and that accounts for why there was a slightly greater proportion who could walk but could not stand still for those designated time points. But what is interesting is for the girls that we were observing who could walk independently, most of those girls could also take a side step, and this was usually to negotiate furniture within their house. Most of them could turn a very decent turning angle and turn and change direction during their walking, but it was much harder to step over an obstacle. We assessed that by asking families to show us their daughter stepping over the runner in a door, and that was and also walking on a slope. And a small proportion of girls are able to run, and so this slide is also showing you the tremendous variability in skills that relate to walking. So running is where there is actually a flight phase. We would see both feet off the floor for even if it was for a small period of time, but that is the definition of a run. So some girls are able to run. So in summary, we observed alterations in muscle tone. We observed the effects of dyspraxia, and for some girls the comorbidities of epilepsy and scoliosis were also impacting on their ability to perform their motor skills. So motor skills are also affected by the general wellness of the girl. We also saw the patterns, as we have found with, and other researchers have found with other aspects of how Rett syndrome affects the children and the women, that the more severe mutations were associated with generally poorer gross motor skills, and other mutations were associated with better and stronger motor skills. And generally, skills were weaker when in women compared to the younger girls, but we observed many women who retained the ability to walk. And indeed, when we looked at our follow-up study with those 70, the subset of 70 who had provided video on both times, those women were still walking. So for us, this was really important evidence that the ability to walk can be maintained, and that that women who are walking have we have seen them maintaining their ability to walk, and that beyond the school years, planning for appropriate activities and maintenance of fitness would appear to us to be a very important part of working out how that woman lives her daily life. So our next question is, can we look more specifically at how walking is maintained? And we looked at our questionnaire data for this information shown in this slide. And of course, if you remember back to the original diagram of our study, we have up to 6 observation points per person to enable us to examine walking trajectory because of the successive waves of data collection. And in this group, we find that approximately a third of the whole population with Rett syndrome have maintained capacity to walk independently over the trajectory. A smaller proportion have maintained the ability to walk with assistance, and approximately a third of our population did not learn to walk, and that was their and were unable to walk over their observed trajectory. And also, similar to the proportion who could walk with assistance, about 14% had walking skills, but their walking skills did decrease. So this is again mapping out the trajectory of walking. And for us, we have from the early days of describing Rett syndrome, we talk about the stabilization during the primary school years, and then some deterioration and a really different phenotype in those who are older. And that may occur in some girls, but here we have evidence that this model of staging does not account for everyone with Rett syndrome. And for us, this is a part of an evidence-based description of the long term that I think could be, we hope will be very useful for families understanding how their daughters might progress, but also for services who need to plan to provide for the best life for girls as they grow to become women, and then and thereafter healthy aging. So this sort of picture is a part of what we have been able to learn by maintaining our research relationships with families over time. So now we come to the question of embedding gross motor skills in daily life. How can we work with the girls and women also to help them to practice? We all need to practice to be able to maintain our physical capacities and also to learn. So we've got 2 main theories that we can be guided on for looking at how we can use our motor skills. And the first is motor learning theory. So we have a need to learn motor skills, and I would also add to that we have a need to maintain our motor skills. And this relates to the sort of tasks we do. We need to practice, we need to be choosing activities that are appropriate to us, we need to choose activities that we like doing, and then we need to practice with engaging in those activities, but not getting too tired and not getting too stressed. So that is task-related aspects that help anybody to learn. So then if we add that to having an environment which is safe, has the equipment and the toys or other items that are motivating to the girl. There's a variety of ways we can change our environment, and then working together with families, therapists and school staff so that goals are consistently supported, and thereafter you have a very proactive environment. So this is sort of the ideal environmental setting. And also for the girl, it's very important that she feels rapport with the people she's working with, that she's given time to overcome her dyspraxia. She has some sensory sense of what she's about to do, and receives praise and rewards for what she manages to achieve. She's sat for all this time, or she got up with hardly any help at all. We can praise and tell her how good she's done. She has walked this distance, and that's very, well, she got to her goal, which was we really need to be remembering praise, and following any performance of gross motor activity we need rest. So that and those factors together are all helping us to learn motor skills, and indeed I should add into this slide maintaining our motor skills. So we have this very broad concept of that learning a skill depends on a lot of other internal feelings, aspects in relation to what we're learning and how that environment comes around us to nurture that learning. And that together is, as I've said, it's motor learning theory. So we also have some animal studies in the arena of Rett syndrome. So these were mice with a MECP2 mutation, and this little diagram is showing you that when their living environment is full of motor activities to do, supported by visual stimulation, there's stuff to see, there's stuff to listen to, there's stuff to think about, and there's lots of sensation. There's different, surfaces to be crawling through, or the surface that of the ground in itself. And these aspects are all contributing to more robust learning. And this has been found replicated in, I think, 3 studies now. And when you compare the acquisition of skill in mice who have an environment that is less enriched compared to this type of environment, then you see a dramatic difference in the capacity to perform motor skills. And what we would hypothesize is a relationship with what is called BDNF, a protein called BDNF. Now, this is a neurotrophin, and it's very important for nerve development and connectivity. And this is for all of us. And during development, nerve cells compete for these neurotrophins, and the ones that get the neurotrophins are the ones that develop to a greater extent and connect more widely with other neurons. So we would hypothesize what we know from neurobiology is that MECP2 gene produces its MECP2 protein, the MECP2 protein, and one of the many functions of MECP2 is to then influence the BDNF gene, and thereafter the production of that protein, which can then stimulate our nervous development. And so with these mouse studies, because they are mice, they have been able to measure the BDNF, and with all of that activity in that enriched environment, in one of the studies, the mice also demonstrated increased levels of BDNF. So we would suggest, hypothesize that activity is going to be favourable to our capacity to learn motor skills, and that this could be through a mechanism of being able to produce BDNF, because activity itself can stimulate the activity of that BDNF gene. So there's work to be done in this area to better understand how that will apply to our girls and how we can use that to best advantage. But what we do have so far, we do have a series of studies that have looked at, you'll see on the right, a very small number of girls have participated, and women also have participated in those studies. But each of them, treadmill training, practicing of transfers and walking, hydrotherapy, they have each been associated with observable improvements. The problem we have is that these are small numbers of girls, and we haven't yet got, in these studies, got control periods so we can see whether that particular learning was going to happen anyway. We do have one study, and this was a study that I was involved with Maya Lotan with, and there was a conductive education centre in Israel, and they had places available, and they offered those places to girls with Rett syndrome. There was a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old girl who took up their places in this program. And so what that gave us was the opportunity to observe the girls' progress over this period. And what is important is that we were able to establish, before the program started, a baseline. You can see the measurement of skills in the baseline period, which was stable. And then in the intervention period, at time points, we were able to use our assessments. We used, one of the assessments we used was the gross motor assessment from our video study, which you saw some of the items demonstrated in those previous graphs. But we were able to observe some improvement over time in these girls. So for this program, for the general motor skills, this is describing abilities to sit, stand, walk, and sit to stand. This is the more fundamental skills. This girl could achieve those skills, but these two girls for whom those skills were harder did gain in score from 25 to 30. So this represented something that certainly the staff were very pleased to have seen this improvement in these girls. And for the more complex skills, and you would remember some of those illustrated in the previous graphs, this was bending down to the floor and picking something up, getting up from the floor. The more complex, walking up a slope, stepping over an obstacle. These also, we illustrated a stable baseline, and thereafter they participated in the program, and there was improvement for each of these girls. So this is starting to get us more information as to how programs can be useful for girls with Rett syndrome. These girls were very happy in their programs, and were working very hard with the staff in those programs, and they did gain some skills. So this is setting the scene for more studies where we start with a baseline, and then we can look at how those goals are actually achieved. So some of you will have seen this slide yesterday. I never get tired of looking at these pictures, but motor skills depend on enough flexibility to be able to use our bodies, and in part that refers to our spine. And these two slides show very nice positioning where you can get stretch in a very naturalistic way during a lying activity, and here is a child being set up with better range of movement to be able to more able to work more actively in upright postures. I'm showing these two slides because they have show variety in sitting positions, and importantly, what I've also been doing a very small pilot study with some young girls in China, and what we have established is we're working on a manual of early enriched intervention, and so that's enabled us to play with lots of ideas to try and pull this into a very comprehensive way of the girls looking at their motor skills. And so, for example, to practice sitting, part of practicing sitting is the girl exerting some choice as to how she sits. And so, for example, she could be shown a picture of her sitting on a stool or sitting on her peanut ball, and then have the choice of which one she was going to practice. So that helps to make that practicing of sitting, giving her the activity and the strength and the endurance, but also the other aspects of learning that we can give her, and also it's giving her some autonomy. So we've been working with those ideas. I'm showing you 4 pictures of standing. The little girl in the top left is pulling herself. She has pulled herself to standing at that bar, which is in front of a TV that's set back in the cabinet, and she has does that certainly did that regularly in her daily life, because she was motivated to get up to the TV, and there she is holding onto that bar and being able to have standing practice while she's doing an activity that she's enjoying. The little girl in the stander, and also incidentally wearing her Theratogs suit, is standing there in the kitchen, and there is noise, there is bustle, there is food to taste. There are lots of aspects of that standing that it's very meaningful in her life. So that is an excellent opportunity for her to be using her muscles and participating in family life. And I'm reminded of, kitchen activities, a really lovely story, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but it was with a young girl with Rett syndrome who was making a pesto with her mother. And there was not only the bustle of the kitchen and all the ingredients, and her mum, they were grinding together the ingredients of the pesto, but there also was this lovely smell. And so I can imagine that was a very rich learning environment for that particular child. This young girl with her dad is standing, and this is an activity that they both actually enjoy. And funnily, if you think of being I'll start again. There are two TVs going in this room, so they're looking at the camera for this photo, but she can get lots of standing practice and look at her TV on to the right, and he's quite happy watching his cricket game on his TV to the left. So, and they're together as well, so there's physical contact. It's easy for them to do this practice, and it's giving them both an activity to do while they're in this very stationary position. And of course, I'll just go back. This picture down in the right is standing and walking in this very natural environment. So there is diversity of texture underfoot, and the slopes, the little slopes of that sand with its undulations. And there is challenge for her standing, and there is also a challenge for her walking. With walkers and lots of other the activities, the most common activities that families use are using swimming and using horse riding, which are both extremely rich activities for muscle use and learning to have better postures and movements. So I'll just show some video clips now of just some practicing of sitting, and just showing you this little girl here. Rocking movement, as well as choosing what you're going to do when you get up to that sitting position, so up to that standing position. And transition movements are extraordinarily important for girls of all abilities with Rett syndrome. We can see here the girl who has very strong skills and can pick something up on the floor, and the little girl who learned to pull herself up at the bar to get up to watch her TV. But even for children who cannot stand on their own or participate in sit to stand movements, what we have found from our quality of life interviews with families is that when children and women have the opportunity to change their position, then that is, parents perceive that as very important for their daughter. Her face brightens and really she's had sitting for too long. So transitions are about being active, but they're also about how we can build a routine into daily life for girls who can't participate in these movements, and thereafter have variety in their body position, which gives natural stretch and a change, which mothers have observed when they go to change their daughter's position or move her from her wheelchair, that her face will brighten with the pleasure, and they perceive that as relating to the pleasure of doing something different. They perceive their daughter sometimes having the feeling that they have sat for too long. So standing and walking, I can show you two more older, but there is some evidence that very textured insoles with different undulations in the insoles in their shoes has assisted in improving the balance and motor performance of those patients with Parkinson's. So we are drawing from that evidence and starting to look at how that might be a part of an environment that is more enriched, that can be more challenging without it having to be harder work for the people who are supporting. So it's setting up the environment. And we also have been having the girls stand and walk on this sort of stony style texture, which we are hypothesizing is helpful to the mechanism of that girl's balance. And this little video is just walking. We have a lot of families have described to us that their daughters enjoy that rhythm of walking, and this is assisted walking or walking independently. We also have aspects of the natural environment. Now, these little surfaces are not the natural environment, but that's how we can do that within a therapy setting or even a household setting. But in the natural environment, we have places to walk which have challenging surfaces, and with appropriate support for safety, these can be great environments for anyone, for the girl with Rett syndrome who can enjoy the elements of the weather and the natural environment, but also have great places to stand and walk. So, and another idea that we've sort of worked with our environmental enrichment is that parts of the building have different aspects of sensory stimulation, and I can envisage this within a household setting, and I have talked to families who have along the hallway where they want their daughter to walk from say the kitchen down to her bedroom. There are aspects of that pathway that has aspects about it that she really enjoys, like aspects of light or something, some ribbons or beads or things which are decorating that route so that she enjoys and can have stops to be very interested in that pathway that she's walking. So there are ways that a household can be very simply adapted or decorated for interim rewards along a particular pathway, which would be the goal, that she get to her bedroom. But here it can be broken up into something that that makes more sense or can be achieved with a lot of pleasure along the way. So, oh, can you still see me?
Hi, Jenny. I can see your webcam, but I don't see your slides anymore.
Yes, I think they've logged me out. Let me just log in again.
Okay, I'll just take this opportunity while you're doing that to remind everyone we've got a lot of questions in the queue. You can please continue to put them in. We have about 10 minutes left, but if everyone wants to stay on, get connected.
Yes. I'll just get this sorted.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if you can look into the chat box, you'll see I put a link to the Rett database. So a lot, there's power in numbers, and the correlations of genotype to phenotype only get stronger the more we contribute and participate in research. So I really encourage everybody to, please take the time.
I've got somebody coming because it's logged me out. So yes, so now is the time for some questions, and we can go back to what I'm doing as soon as I get back on. So you're not seeing me at all, Paige?
We see you on your webcam, but we don't see your slide. We just see you.
Okay. I don't want to cancel this.
That's okay. Did you have many more slides?
About another half a dozen. Well, we're getting close to the hour anyway, so I've got a few more. So if we could start with some questions, and hopefully we can come back to those. That was the end. Oh no, there's one more video one, but that's we've covered a lot of ground. So
yeah, we have. If your email is working, you could email your slides to me, and I can pull up. The video probably won't work, but I could pull up your slides for you.
Yes. Okay, so
is this your email connection as well?
No, I just can't get off the blackness of my screen. I've got a, I think it's internal. I'll try that. Okay, should we have a, no, I see, I just can't get off my black screen. So it would be worth if we had a couple of questions, and then hopefully we can come back to the final ones.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have wonderful questions here. Yes. So, okay, so let's go. We've got a question about, okay, sorry, we have so many questions. Let me just make sure I can see them. Okay, can you clarify a hypothesis about why the different mutations are correlated with such strong differing abilities, and do you consider that a predictor of ability?
Okay, yes. Just 1 second, Paige. I'm on a webinar. This is an international webinar, and my screen with my
It's nice to have tech support so handy.
to look at what he can do with my screen. Is that all right? Hello?
Nope. We have a black screen still.
Yes. And can I talk now?
Yes, we can hear you, and we can still see you on your webcam.
Yes, okay. In answer to that question, the data falls into patterns in relation to the mutations that we can look at. And I might be getting some success here with the help of Errol. And we cannot, we don't have a clear understanding of exactly why that is, but for example, some aspects of the gene are more critical to the production of the NECP2 protein, And those aspects of the gene are where some of the mutations are sitting. So, for example, that might be for example, the 270X mutation is sitting in the metal binding domain, and that is a really critical area for the production of the protein. And there are some groups, for example, for girls who have what is called a large deletion, there is a very substantial portion of the gene the gene is made up of 4 exons. And thank you so much. Yeah, it looks like I'm back on board. Can you see my screen?
We see a large webcam, but we don't see your slide.
Oh, yes. People can see me now.
There we go.
Yes. Now, I could not have done that myself, so thank you to, I'll just quickly flick through. And so there's different parts of the gene will have particularly critical roles in effect in producing the protein, and we need the protein to then go on and affect all the other genes. MECP2 is a master gene, and so if the mutation, here we are. If the mutation is in areas of the gene which are particularly critical, then that is, or a very large proportion of the whole gene is missing, then that is consistent with the differences that we observe in phenotype.
Okay.
What do you want me to do, Paige? Do you want to talk more questions, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, why don't I give you the next question that I had queued up, and then we can go back to your slide.
You've done that thinking.
We have a question if there's any data on the effects of treating joint contractures on the maintenance of walking skills.
The answer is I am not aware of specific data with that regard. I think anecdotally, well, for example, if we think about scoliosis, reducing the contractures in the spine is associated with maintaining whatever motor skills afterwards. So we would imagine that spinal, it's not flexibility now, but it's reduction of contracture, and that is associated with the maintenance of skills. So we have observed girls who lose ability to walk because of their increasing contracture in their spine. There's also the issue of ankles becoming very tight, and from my observations, there are many girls with Rett syndrome who can walk very capably on their toes, and that's because they very much like to keep moving and keep changing their weight from one leg to another, and really do a lot of walking rather than standing. So in a sense, walking can still be maintained with sometimes very tight ankles, but usually ankle contractures and foot contractures, usually it's usually wiser to, when the girl is younger, to be using some sort of splint like an AFO, or walking in fairly sort of shoes that are very supportive and can help that girl to walk with flat feet, so that's helpful to her balance. So there is anecdotal evidence rather than us being able to be very clear about the outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
If you have contracture with your knees and hips, then that leads to more of a crouching gait, and that is harder to maintain.
Okay. Thank you. Why don't you go ahead with your slides now, since we're working.
Okay.
Connection.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I don't know what happened then, and I'm very glad that he came and did, immediately. This is my final little slide of videos, and here you can see opportunities in the net to be limited by a diagnosis. We should look to the world and see how we can fit into the world in exciting ways, for no matter what the capacity is, but there are ways to get out and about that are very, very rewarding as life experiences. So just for the last few minutes, I wanted to show a little bit of our physical activity study data, and this has been supported by rettsyndrome.org. And in the interests of time, I might skip over a couple of these slides. But what we have found is that this little monitor called a stepwatch, and here it is shown on this girl, is we compared 3 different monitors to find what was most accurate for the style of gait with girls with Rett syndrome, and this was the most accurate monitor. So this is the one we've been using in our subsequent analyses. And this slide is showing you, for girls who walk independently, on average, our group of 82 were taking something around 7,000 steps a day. And we found these numbers very empowering, because if you add up all the small portions of activity through a day, it can be substantial. And so everyone who's looking after the girl with Rett syndrome, schools, therapists and families and other community bodies, can be aware of how we can build our performance if we have multiple opportunities. And not surprisingly, with assistance, there were smaller steps, and that shows how the extra support needs to be built into the day to enable those steps. I will skip that, because what I would like to illustrate to you is this. The participating families also completed a diary card, and in this card, for each 15-minute epoch, they rated their daughter's dominant activity as either lying, sitting, standing, slow or fast walking. And we matched those numbers with the number of steps counted on the stepwatch. So we could use the objective measure to look at what we could learn from this parent report diary card. And what we found was that the individual categories were less informative. But if we combined the time standing and the time walking, and this is with or without assistance, with the to make a variable which we call uptime, and we matched that to the steps on the SAM, we had an extremely strong correlation. So for every additional minute of uptime, and that's either standing or walking, there were an additional 25 steps. And we believe that this is a very, very useful finding, because this very simple diary of a day is a tool for documenting uptime for the girl with Rett syndrome. And this could very much be used to understand what her uptime actually is, and thereafter establishing goals for how we can build more uptime into her day. And I can envisage this being a very useful tool for in part for families, but also for school settings and activity centre settings for when the girls have graduated from school and are adult. So what I hope I've been able to demonstrate today is a lot of observations, so that we can have the knowledge to find out what what gross motor skills are affected, how much they are effective, what the girls can do and who they should be doing those skills with. And we've also now have an activity record that we can document the concept of uptime, and we can learn from that. And thereafter, if we know how the girls are performing, we can understand what factors we can look at what factors are contributing to the use of the skill. And then we can say, well, how important is this activity? Can we actually implement this in our daily lives? And is it fun for the girl? And then we have the wisdom to actually move towards action. So deciding how we structure the girl's day, and thereafter harnessing supports to do that, because as the old adage says, it really takes a village to raise a child. And all of my acknowledgements, the families, our funding bodies, importantly, both our consumer reference groups for Interret and the Australian Rett syndrome studies, because these families guide the directions of our research. And I think that's it from me. Thank you, Paige.
Oops, sorry, I was on mute while I was trying to get some of
Hello.
these questions answered that folks are asking. Thank you so very much, Jenny. I love your presentation. So rich. We have so many questions.
Hello.
Jenny, can you hear me?
Paige, I actually can't hear you now.
Okay. Megan, can you hear me? Megan?
Yes, I can hear you, Paige.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm here. I'm here again.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So we had a question about whether if you were in the natural history study, if your information is automatically entered into Rett base or into Rett. So I replied to the audience, Jenny, that no, because of privacy reasons, you have to enter each study separately and encourage people to do that.
Yes, absolutely. We have very strict rules in the collection of data. And exactly as you say, Paige, it's privacy, so we're separate. So the good thing about having different studies running is that we can, if we're all finding consistent findings, then we really know we've found out a true picture. So it's important that we have more than one study. So it's very important that we have multiple research groups who are interested in Rett syndrome. Absolutely.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Cross-validating data is very important.
Yep.
If the family had entered into Interret when their child was first diagnosed but hasn't participated since, what should they do?
Well, they can email us. We would love everybody to be able to participate in our follow-up questionnaire. We may have you on our list. For everyone who is in our Interret questionnaire, we are working our way through the number of families. So what we've done so far, I think we've invited roughly 300 families, and I think it's something like 170 returned questionnaires already, so it's really encouraging, and that's over the last month. So what we do is we invite families in sort of batches so that we can handle the follow-up, because if it's an online, we can send you a paper questionnaire if that is your preference. But if you have internet access, it is very convenient and usually very, very efficient to go online to our online questionnaire. And so, but we do need to ring families and check that they received the email with their logins and that they've still got that with time. So we're doing it in small stages. For anyone who does want to participate and feels that now would be a good time, if you send an email to us or contact us on our Facebook page, then we can include you very, very soon in the study.
Great. Thank you. And I had shared through the chat box a link to Interret.
Yes. Oh, lovely. Lovely. You're so efficient.
I'm using technology to our advantage.
Oh, it's good. Yes. Okay. Yes. No more VHS tapes.
Yeah, so since we had a few fits and starts, if you can go for another 5 minutes, we'd really appreciate it, and I can share another question.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, this is a very good question, and it's about intervention. So the question is, my daughter has scoliosis that's beginning to progress a bit more rapidly, even though her growth plates have closed. She's mobile. She does a variety of motor activities, walking on a treadmill, riding an adaptive bike, horseback riding. She loves all of those things and is very good at it, but she doesn't tolerate stretching at all, and she'll tighten up her muscles and resist for any range of motion stretching activities. What would you encourage to help do that important?
I think it's a matter of experimenting. She may be more happy to have stretches if she's watching a TV program that she likes, or listening to the music that she likes. It may be that stretching her when she goes in the water is the way to give her a lovely stretch, which you would not be doing every day, but it would give her regular stretch. So I think we would also hypothesize that the activity in itself is giving her stretch. So for her, taking steps is stretching her hips and her knees every time she has to move through range with all of those activities, and possibly also considering the position of prone lying for her may also be giving her some stretch, for example, to the front of her hips, and so maybe time on her tummy in bed before she gets up or before she goes to sleep. You know, you could have some time on her tummy or in front of a DVD. So maybe prone lying or stretch in the pool would be the way to really give her that extra element of her workout. It sounds like she's participating beautifully in lots of fun things, though.
Yeah, good. I love the suggestion of water. I know it works really well for Katie. As soon as we get her into a warm bath at night, she just relaxes into anything that.
Yes, water's great. Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Another question we had was a parent wanted you to repeat what kind of inserts in shoes were you talking about earlier? AFOs, SMOs, or a different kind of insert?
No. What I was talking about is that there have been some studies with adults with Parkinson's disease, and you may or may not know what Parkinson's disease is, but an element of that affects movement, and that affects the patients become very stiff and they might lose balance, and there's a few features about that do have some similarities to what we see with Rett syndrome, but of course it is vastly different. But for patients with Rett syndrome, with Parkinson's, there have been studies where they have looked at putting an insole, so just like in a running shoe you have an insole, you know, that sort of squishy bit that you can actually take out if you run through mud and you've got to clean your shoes. But there's an insole in shoes, and so there have been a couple of studies where they have looked at putting an insole that has a very textured shape and a little, but it's little. I mean, you still got to fit it inside your shoe, but it has been undulating, and there is preliminary evidence that that has been good for those patients' balance. So for every step, for every moment they're standing, their body has a slightly different surface, and those opportunities have built up for those patients, and they have in preliminary work shown better balance. And there's been other studies that have looked at patients with Parkinson's walking over sort of little rocky landscapes as practice to help their balance. And this, of course, is with some support so that the patients are safe. But we like the idea of using as much challenge within an activity as possible, because that is what makes it a very enriched challenge. And so the idea of using different surfaces for standing and walking stems from those Parkinson's patients' studies, but also is consistent with our environmental enrichment notions that we're trying to define with greater clarity at the moment. And so this is something we hope to be testing very, very soon and see how that as an element within a program can improve motor function. So it's just like a little insole, it's not an AFO.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Let's do two more questions. One is from the parent of a 4-year-old who is curious, how late in life have you seen children learn to walk?
Our latest in our very large sample was around about 7 or 8.
Sorry, Jenny. She's 4 years old and she does not walk now, and so the question is about opportunity.
Yes, in terms of a time frame.
Right.
Yes. I think going back to that early graph with about 900 girls, we generally saw that all of the girls who were going to learn to walk had learned to walk by 7 or 8 years. So the majority in the early couple of years, and then there is that more gentler slope which I showed, and so up to around 7 and also 8 years of age, we have girls who have learned how to walk. So it's a fairly wide time frame for that skill to develop, but it's smaller number of girls who can achieve independent walking between the age of 4 and 8.
Okay, great. And the last question for today, we had a couple of people ask about sensory regulation, and what are some of your suggestions for how to get a girl into a regulated state to be ready for a physical therapy session? How long do you work with her to try to get her regulated, and what are some of the things that you do?
I'm thinking that
Sorry, Jenny, we lost your audio.
Yes, yes, and I'm here now. So, in the first instance, I think getting that calmness is the first part of any session. So that might be with a quiet activity, with something very comfortable, with music, with things that are known and valued, so you can tap into that need for routines. I think being very clear about what you're wanting to do or what the girl might want to do, and working with her choices. And this is something we've been working with in our pilot study, is choosing between different pictures of activities. So there's a little bit more self-determination, but calmness at the beginning, and then practicing an activity is really sort of laying the groundwork for enjoyment of the activity and thereafter learning. And I think there's different, sometimes the girl just needs time. For example, in the pool, she just needs time before she can then settle down and do some more structured activities. But the other thing I would mention is if there is capacity to walk, going for a walk with is often a good way to start a session of working on motor skills, because of the rhythm of walking. And many times I've observed girls to really enjoy that rhythm of walking, and that also is another mechanism that you can help the girl to feel more settled. She's using some energy, but it's productive and it's rhythmic. And I think that's also a very useful way to start and help somebody to be in a calm mood, with a calm mood, so that they can enjoy other activities.
Great. Thank you. I think it's very important that therapy is something that we can prepare for and that she needs to be engaged in and happy to be doing. And thank you for the suggestions for how to get some of our girls therapy ready, if you will. Okay. Well, I think we've gone about 20 minutes over, which is fine. We have quite a few more questions, and I know, Jenny, you'd be happy to work with me to get those answered. Thank you to everyone for submitting your questions, and thank you for attending today. We're just so grateful for the work that you're doing, and we wish you the best of luck in your continued research and observations. We appreciate your partnership. We appreciate your overview.
We love this also. We're very happy and privileged to be a part of it.
Great. Well, thank you. So this will conclude our webinar for today. Please join us tomorrow. We have 3 great sessions on communication, and the day after we'll conclude our week of webinars with a information on special needs planning for the future, updates on clinical trials, and we'll meet again with Jenny to conclude our Friday session with a discussion on quality of life, which I'm really looking forward, because underlying all research, all areas of symptoms, and you know, we have to remember that we're families and we're here to enjoy our journey together. So we look forward to your talk on Friday, Jenny. Thank you. Have a good evening or a good rest of day wherever you are in the world. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.